Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to tournament poker strategy. And now, here are your hosts, Ron Fez Buddy and Killingbird.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. Killingbird here with Ron Fez. Buddy, how's it going, sir?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. No complaints.
No complaints. Just, that's nice.
I know. Life's good. Life's good like that.
I'd like to have no complaints.
Well, I'm finally playing a little poker again.
Yeah.
I'm feeling fulfilled again.
Nice. Yeah. I've been so busy. I think we talked about it last episode. There's a lot going on behind the scenes at TPE, and so I've been working like crazy on that stuff, but I did take some time out to play a couple of sessions on Merge and made a final table, which was fun. Got my blood boiling again and back into it, so that was cool. What about you?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, just kind of getting back into it. I think I've put in 2 or 3 sessions in the last weeks, which is a lot compared to what I was doing the couple weeks before that, and final table 1, a 5 rebuy. Unfortunately, I ended up busting in 7th, so no real significant money, but still just to kind of get back playing, and I think playing well. Just kind of feels good. So,
are you ready for the series, the Maximus series on Merge?
I am ready. I kind of put a schedule together, so I feel like I'm ready to go. I doubt I'll end up playing everything that I put on my schedule, but it's sort of a target, like what I'd like to try to play everything.
Right. You know what? Let's do a preview show next episode.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
Cool. Yep, ready for that.
So yeah, and the other thing I've been doing, although I haven't been playing a ton, I've been going in the Tournament Poker Edge chat room almost every night, and that place is happening, man.
Yeah.
People are in there just crushing tournaments and sharing strategy and talking, and it's been pretty cool to see. There's 15 to 20 people in there. It seems like every time I log in at night. So
that's awesome. Yeah, nothing like talking to people about the game and just having a community of people to talk to.
Yep.
and share the time with, right?
Yeah,
it's a lonely grind,
Yeah, it's nice to get in there and just kind of see how people are doing, and it's always nice to have somebody cheer you on. And
so let me ask you. So for those who don't know the background behind sort of TPE and Derek and I, we met on 2+2, and we joined a message board of poker players that kind of broke off from 2+2, made our own board for more sort of, direct conversation, called LOL Nice Squeeze.
Shout out to the squeezers.
So before that happened, Derek, what was your poker community like? Like, who did you talk to? What did you do for sort of conversation about poker?
Really, before that, I would read a lot on 2+2 and stuff, but I didn't post a ton.
Right.
In fact, one of my first significant posts was the one where you and I met via that post.
Right.
Up until that point, I would post like a sweat thread here or there, or respond to some strategy, but not a ton. So really, the only poker conversation I had were with a couple of guys who I play in a home game with.
Right.
Who were the more serious poker players of the home game crew, because most people are just there to drink beer and play cards.
Right.
They don't care if it's poker or 5-card stud or acey-doocy. But there was 1 or 2 guys who were relatively serious about it. We would talk a decent amount of strategy. But even talking to one person, even if that person's really good, I don't know if that's enough.
Right. No.
I think you need to talk to a wide variety of people, like people who play differently than you, people who are better than you, people who are worse than you.
Yeah.
You need a little bit of everything.
I agree. I agree.
And I think that's what LOL Nice Squeeze fulfilled that at the time, and I think the TPE chat room fulfills it to a great degree now. So
yeah, actually, that's a good point about people who are better and people who are worse, right? Because it's good to teach people, right? It's helpful because it gets you to think about the topics, and it helps you to just sort of express the fundamentals in a way that maybe you never really thought through before.
Right.
So it's good to have people that you're better than and you could help. But then at the same time, it's also good to talk to people who are better than you and, first of all, be able to take criticism, because there's nothing more annoying than people asking you for hand advice and then like defending it to their death.
Right.
What they did and why they did what they did and just not having an open mind. But if you can have an open mind, talking to people are better than you, obviously. I mean, it's a pretty obvious statement, but I don't know if people like take advantage of that enough. And that's what, if you don't have a community, find a community, because it's really helpful. It really helped me when we formed Alumni Squeeze. It just, some amazing players came out of there. Hit the Panda for one, right? It's just...
Yeah, it was funny. I was looking at the list, and I guess I won't say them all because I don't know if it's private or I don't want to spill any beans. But there's some pretty amazing players that came out of that group, like names that a lot of people would know. So
yeah, well, I mean,
that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that was a fun time. So cool,
no doubt.
Well, that's a good good segue into today's guest, right? Given the topic that he's sort of becoming known for on the site and his thought process.
Yep. Yeah, so today, and people have been kind of asking for more of him, so we have finally been able to get him on the podcast. Daryl Jace is going to join us. The videos are super popular, and I think people will enjoy a conversation with him today for sure.
So the thing about Daryl is two things. First of all, his videos are getting better and better, right? Like, not that his early videos were bad at all. They were chock full of great information, but he's becoming so comfortable teaching that I think they're quickly rising to some of the best in the site. But I always label his videos as the advanced class,
Yeah.
And I think that's fair, so people know what they're getting into. I definitely, sort of find that he gets very in depth in topics, and he goes beyond sort of just the simple, basic, standard stuff that you want to learn to make sure that you don't have major leaks. He teaches you how to elevate your game a bit further. So I think he's great for that. And the topic today is we're going to talk about sort of just becoming a better poker player, exploiting tendencies, how to get and use information, and how to just sort of what to do to continue and improve your game. And I think he's a really good guest for that sort of thing. And I think we're going to take a little bit of departure. We're not going to necessarily pick a bunch of hands to go over. We may have some ideas and hand examples that come up as we talk about it. I think we're going to be a little more theoretical this time around, so hopefully you guys like that.
Yeah, and I would also recommend to people out there, if you're not familiar with it, there's an article that Daryl wrote on Tournament Poker Edge about how to obtain and use information in poker, and I actually think that would be a really good primer. I actually read it back today because I knew we were going to have Daryl on the podcast, so I read it today, and I was once again amazed at how good it was, so I actually tweeted it out for everybody to check out. But I think it's worth reading that article even before listening to this interview, because he's got a lot of really cool ideas about this topic. So that's a good primer, and then you can kind of dig in with the podcast.
Yeah, if you go to tournamentpokeredge.com/articles, it's on the first page. You have to scroll down. It's about, I guess there's maybe like 10 or so articles since that one. But it's there on the first page. And if you want to go directly to it, it's tournamentpokeredge.com/poker-end-how-to-use-it. Just go to articles.
That's easy enough to remember.
Just go to articles.
There you go. So cool. Let's since we've hyped it up so much, I guess we should get into it. So let's take a quick break, and we will come back with Daryl Jace here on the Tournament Poker Edge podcast.
Hey MTTers, this is Casey Big Dog Pocket Fives Jarzovic from TournamentPokerEdge.com. If you've been looking for a trading site dedicated exclusively to tournament poker, then look no further. Tournament Poker Edge is only $23.95 per month, with no initial sign-up fee, and we post a new training video every weekday. You'll also find poker-related articles, blogs, and very active strategy forums. We even offer you the ability to upload your own video for others to discuss. So head on over to TournamentPokerEdge.com and find out why it's quickly becoming the destination for tournament poker players looking to take their game to the next level. TournamentPokerEdge.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. Time to bring in today's guest pro, and it's one of our relatively new pros, but he has done a couple of series for us, and they've been very popular, and people have been asking to get him on the podcast, so glad we're finally able to do that. So we welcome Mr. Daryl Jace to the show. How you doing, sir?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey, Daryl. It's funny, Daryl did exactly what Derek just said. We scheduled this podcast, and I started just as we did it. I got it for some reason. I got 2 or 3 PMs into my TPE message box asking if we could bring you on the show because your latest series just ended. So people are really excited about that series and wanted to bring you on. So here we are. Welcome.
Yep.
Cool. Should be interesting.
Yeah.
Bye. For you guys.
Well, I guess a good place to start, since you are relatively new to TPE, is maybe a little bit of background on how you got into poker and what your career has been up till now. I know from looking at your bio, I think you started a lot earlier than a lot of people did, and certainly longer than I did. I think it said you've been playing about 9 or 10 years. Wow. So, maybe one of the things you can do is talk about what it was like, back then when you started compared to now.
Yeah, I think I have a pretty atypical type of, coming up story. I think a lot of people have, they have stories where they start out grinding small and they move from cash to SMG, sit and goes, or sit and goes to MTTs, or MTTs to sit and goes, and they, slowly move up, and then they take a shot or something. I think, right. I was 14 or something, and I think all the sites just had a whole bunch of free rolls, and I remember just grinding those a ton.
Right.
For a really long time, for 5-6 months, I would just grind those. Wake up, play poker for 10 hours, go to sleep, grind those out. Then I think I made $3K playing free rolls, and then I played a little bit of cash on this site called Casual Poker, which I'm sure isn't around anymore.
Wow, I don't even remember that one.
And then I just saw the Sunday Million on Stars, and I randomly decided to enter in it.
How much of your bankroll was that at the time?
I made 3K playing poker, so I guess it was I had 15 buy-ins.
Yeah.
Money on Stars.
No problem.
So that day, at Sunday at 10 in the morning or 12, whatever it was, I see that tournament for the first time, and I don't think I've ever played a real money tournament before. So
wow.
I think I'm 14, 15, or 16, but for every reason, I don't have a license yet or something. So I have to have somebody drive me that day, 2 hours before it starts, get the Western Union transfer, get into my account, I don't know, just before the tournament starts, register that tournament, and end up shipping it for $90K.
Wow.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Was this? You're really well known on 2+2. Around when was this? Because I remember you from 2+2 for a long time. Were you already a regular on 2+2 at that point, or was that before you even got known there?
I think I joined 2+2 probably when I was 19 or 20.
Okay.
And after I won the Sunday Million, I remember just grinding the high stakes a lot back then. So I just played for, a really long time before I found 2+2.
Okay. All right. So you came to 2+2 a bit after you already kind of had some success. Did you have some sort of formal way of teaching yours? If you didn't find 2+2 until 5 years into it, does that mean that did you read books? Did you study, or did you just kind of play and figure it out?
When I was a kid, I remember watching World Poker Tours and World Series of Poker and just being really interested in the poker. And I remember reading 15 or 20 books on poker, when I was 14 or 15. And I would just play all the time. So I think maybe for the time, reading those books just gave you a huge edge.
Yeah.
And I was maybe better than everyone, but I remember just really sucking back then. And
yeah, there was a time where if you just knew a couple basic things, the edge was huge. There was a 1-year window, I think, 2006 to 2007, where no one knew any of that stuff.
Yeah, back then 3-betting was a little bit 5 or 6 betting. So
yeah,
I was 3-betting a ton. So
that's crazy. Awesome. It's so interesting. It would be neat to go back and see your hand history from that Sunday Million, because compared to today, it would probably look so bad. You're probably 4xing and 5xing or something.
It's funny. T-Twist did a series on that just like 2 months ago. He found a Sunday
Oh,
Million.
that's so cool.
Yeah, he found the Sunday. He finished like 19th in a Sunday warm up, I think, about 4 years ago, and he went back and reviewed the hand history, and it's one of our highest rated series because he rips on himself so bad. Because I mean, he was so bad. Like he was 4xing with Jack, like with like 20 big blinds. Like he was just doing some really, really awful stuff.
I mean, I can do that. I mean, my first series for the 75K, the full tilt one from like 8 months ago, I remember just ripping on myself so much for being terrible. The whole video, I'm like, oh, this is awful. This is awful. I can't imagine what it was like 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes to show you how quickly the game changes.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's weird because people a wave of knowledge just swept over the game, and it just seems like people have really picked up. But there's got to be more edges to exploit and ways to interpret information differently. And I think that's one of the things that from watching your videos, Daryl, and this feedback from a lot of the people on the site is that you're really excellent at. It's not necessarily the rules of the game, like here, do this in this situation, but it's more about here's information, here's how to adapt to what people are doing, the table dynamics, and here's how to exploit. Would you say that's? I mean, I'm gonna come out and say I think that's what you do great, but would you say that's true? Is that how you see yourself and where your edges come from?
I think at the high stakes level, as the stakes get higher and higher, everybody's a lot better at the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. So everybody kind of knows push, fold, reshove,
right?
Are pretty decent at all that stuff, 3-betting, barreling, or whatever. As a general statement, they're relatively good compared to 4 or 5 years ago or something. So a lot of your edges just come from adjusting to your opponents based on information.
Right.
So it's not really, back in the day, if push fold 8 years ago, you would just crush without knowing anything else. But now just knowing push fold doesn't give you too much of an edge.
Right.
When you're pushing, people are calling with good ranges, and when you're calling, people are shoving with good ranges.
Right.
There isn't too much edge to be had there. That's not to say that fundamentals aren't important. They're, the foundation of poker. You need to know that shit before you learn all the fancy technical stuff. You don't want to if you're ice skating, you want to learn a triple axel before you learn how to just skate. You know what I mean? So
right.
just on the fundamentals first. Is what I'm saying.
I think we got to take the TP pros out ice skating during the World Series of Poker, Derek.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Good luck finding an ice skating rink in Las Vegas in the summer, though.
There's a will, there's a way.
So, Daryl, you obviously started, very young and won a lot of money young. So, you obviously played through high school. Did you make a conscious decision that you were going to go pro? Did you end up going to college and play while you were in college, or did you just go right to playing poker for a living?
I think I have even a more atypical story than my poker one, because I actually dropped out of school in 7th grade and never even made it to high school.
Oh wow, I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So there, when I was 13, 14, I had, I would literally wake up, play poker. I didn't go to school. So I would just spend all my time playing poker, literally 10, 12 hours a day.
How many hours of poker have you played in your life? Have you ever tried to figure that out?
I'm sure it's over that milestone 10,000 mark.
10,000 hours.
Yeah. I'm sure it's over there. Over.
That wasn't the tipping? Was that the tipping point, or that was Blink, right, or something? One of the
Outliers.
Outliers. Thank you.
I think it was by Malcolm Gladwell or something.
Yeah. I read all those. They kind of blur, but that was the 10,000 was the mark of. For those who haven't read the book, he studied people who were considered geniuses or experts in their field, and he found that there was some condition which led them to not only they had talent in it, but talent alone wasn't what drove them. They had some conditions exist in their life where they were able to put in more hours than everyone else. Something went a certain way, and they ended up being so focused on that particular topic that and he found 10,000 hours was sort of the magic point where he could separate the people who were considered geniuses and natural. So I mean I tried to figure it out once how much time I've spent playing poker, and I think I've put in probably 6,000 or 7,000 hours. So if I've done that, with my schedule, I'm sure that you've probably put in 40,000 hours if you've been playing since 7th grade and all that. So I'm sure.
I actually haven't read Outliers. I just heard about it. I think I'll pick that one up. I read the Tipping Point by him, which is actually pretty good, but it's not as poker related, I guess.
Yeah, Outliers is really really good. And also it helps. And I know you have children, right? Right, Daryl?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have 2 kids, and I read it, and not that I'm pushing my kids to go be a genius in anything, but what it really helped me think about and understand is, recognizing something that your kids excel in and giving them the ability to practice it as much as they want to, because that is what made people super successful in their field, is that they had the conditions exist. So that's one of the things that I took as a parent from that book. So it is definitely, as a parent, an interesting book to read.
I recently read The Art of Learning, which I think is an amazing book for any poker player to read. It was one of the best books I've ever read. It's about this guy, if you've seen the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, about the young chess prodigy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's about that dude, and he writes the whole thing. I don't even think he had anyone help him write it. I could be wrong. Don't hold me to that. But he basically just gives his whole biography and life story, and he goes from being a chess world champion at 20, and then he starts martial arts at age 20 or something, kung fu or some shit, and he becomes the world champion in that too.
Wow.
So he masters chess and then Tai Chi, and he just talks about how he learned to master 2 different art forms and the similarities between the two. He talks about learning things and learning the fundamentals first before you practice on the more technical stuff.
Right.
He would practice a move in Tai Chi, which was the form of fighting he was doing. He would practice a simple move of just moving his hand 6 inches in front of him, just back and forth every time. Mm-hmm. So he'd get the move so down pat and so ingrained to his subconscious that he doesn't have to think about it.
Right.
So he would do that for everything, and when he'd be doing a move that required 8 or 9 steps, he'd just automatically think about it, at the snap of a finger, and he'd be able to concentrate on the more detailed concepts.
Oh, that's really interesting. How did you relate that to poker? How did you take that into your game?
It's directly related to poker. The less you have to concentrate on other stuff, the more you can concentrate on the small detail things. The less you immediately when I sit at a table, I see the stack sizes, the players at my table, my position, my image, their image, how they're playing, table dynamics, and that's immediately. I don't even have to think about that.
Yeah, okay. I was going to ask you. So basically, you've studied those things and you've thought about them so much that they're inherently in your they're instinctual to you now. When you sit down, you kind of just pick all that stuff up.
Exactly, and it goes for even more post flop. You could think about you always add certain hands into a range, always subtract certain hands into a range, and most of his range you get. For example, you see a flop and you get what 95% of the range is, and you don't have to concentrate on what the other 5% is because you automatically discount or add those hands in.
That actually, this leads exactly to sort of the strategy topic that we wanted to talk about today, which was, you just did a theory series on exploiting tendencies, which I think actually we still have one more part to go, the third part. And one of the things that I noticed from the series is that just the information that you're able to pick up is very granular and very specific. For example, you talk about classifying what people do too much or too little, right? So you talk about if they 3-bet too much, or if they call 3-bets too light, or if they c-bet too much, or if they fold to c-bets too much. And, first of all, my question is, how do you do that, with a small sample sometimes when you just sit down at a table and how are you gathering that information? And then secondly, how are you taking that information and turning it into a strategy? And those are probably 2 big topics on their own. So why don't we just start with the first one? How do you get that information when perhaps there's just not that much of a history, if that's even possible, or do you require more history?
So the only way I'd be able to focus on these small examples is by not having to focus on the basic stuff, because I already get that intuitively.
Right.
So I just focus a lot on that stuff, and I'm able to form strategies based on that just by thoughts. A lot of my improvement as a poker player has come from just thinking about poker. And sometimes I would think about a subject just like 3-betting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what variables should you think about when 3-betting, how they affect them, which variables are more important, how often are they more important, in which situations wouldn't they be more important. So a lot of like my eureka moments playing poker have been in like the shower or the toilet, just like thinking about it.
That's fantastic. That's great. Yeah, because I guess when you're away from the table, right, you can just focus on that particular element because the 3-betting situation is gone within 10 seconds, and now you got to move on to a C-betting situation or something like that, right? So you can't focus on that particular topic for too long when you're playing, I guess. Yeah, I guess the question is, and I think you started to answer it is, you sit down at a table and just from watching your video, you sized up the whole table like at your 100K video that just finished. By the end of the first video, probably halfway through the first video, you had reads on everyone. And did you need more than one instance of something happening to pick up a read, or can you just start to understand what they do just from very little information?
Well, obviously, like logically, the more information you have, the better. Like if you see some guy do something 3 times, it's better than 1.
Right.
It kind of depends. Like, it depends how bad the mistake somebody makes. For example, if you see a guy call a raise with 7-deuce offsuit, that's going to be very telling compared to a guy who calls a raise with, 10-9 suited in a spot where you think he shouldn't.
Right.
Like, that's obviously going to be more reliable. You're going to be pretty sure that the guy with 7-deuce off is loose. And if you see the guy call with 10-9 suited in a spot he shouldn't, it isn't as, reliable.
Right. So do you extrapolate a lot from little things you see that paint a broader picture of a player's profile?
I kind of just balance all the ideas in my mind kind of automatically. Like I think about how accurate my read is based upon how many times I've seen him do it, how bad I think the play is, and then I automatically have strategies against that.
Okay.
So I already know what I'm going to do. Like if I see something that I can exploit, I pretty much already know how to exploit it, so I don't really have to think about it.
Right.
So I just spent so much time. I remember watching Phil Galfon's Blue Fire poker videos on philosophy, and he just breaks down how to exploit different players' heads up, and he would just write down how to exploit things, and a lot of the things were counterintuitive. For example, if a guy, check raises a lot, that says something about his calling range. There's a way to exploit his calling range if he raises a lot. And I initially never thought about that. So after watching that video, I remember just thinking about all the leaks I commonly see and thinking about how I would exploit them. What
tendencies would you suggest? If you're really starting to try to start to exploit tendencies, you're moving past the basics, and you're like you said, people understand the fundamentals, and now it's a matter of understanding the information flow and the dynamics. What are the first tendencies that an average player who's trying to get better can start to pick up on, or should start to pick up on?
Well, a big thing about exploiting people is the better you are at poker, the better you are going to be at finding leaks in people's games.
Right.
For example, I remember when I wasn't very good, which was a pretty long period where I actually wasn't very good relative to everybody else. I remember like in 02, 03, 04, just being terrible, and I would talk to people who were just way better than me and way over my head, and I would watch people play and I would think, fuck, how do I beat these people? They're so good, because, I didn't understand the game deeply enough to know when they were actually making mistakes.
Right.
So a big part of picking up on people's mistakes is just knowing when they're making mistakes.
Right.
I forgot what your question was.
Yes. So I asked, so what are some of the tendencies that you could start to focus on first? So if you have someone who's average and getting better, what are some of the things that they could potentially start to look for, maybe that skill that they've acquired by being, a little better than average?
I think the easiest one to do, like, 3-betting is it's a little bit harder to exploit since it's a lot more abstract and theoretical, and it takes a pretty good understanding and to know when someone is being out of line with their 3-betting, unless they're just going crazy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like seeing a guy just call way too much or something is something really easy to exploit. Like if you see a guy calling a re-raise with, 7-5 offsuit, then I think that you don't have to be very good to know that he's calling too much, and you just have to know how to exploit that. So stuff like that, or just a guy who's playing, like, I don't know, just opening too much is pretty easy to pick up on. Or if a guy is just calling post-flop way too much, or...
Right. Those are good. I think those are great places for people who are improving to start. So let's take an example of, you got a guy who calls too much. Let's say you see him, he's called with 7-5 offsuit, and it got to showdown, and you saw it somehow, and he had no business calling, whatever the positions were or the stack sizes or whatever. You recognize that, and now how are you going to adjust your game to that guy? Let's say he's to your left. Are you you're gonna open less because he's going to call, and you're going to be playing out of position, or are you going to want to play pots with him because you know that he has worse hands, or like what's generally what's your adjustment there?
It depends how he plays post flop. We can assume that he's going to be bad player, but if he's the type to call a lot pre-flop and then fold a lot post flop, then we're definitely going to want to be opening a ton and then just c-betting a ton.
Right.
If he's the type to call a lot pre, and then if he flops a backdoor straight draw, he wants to see the turn, and then he's just a huge calling station, then you're just going to want to open a lot tighter.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So you're marrying sort of the two tendencies that you picked up there into a profile of how to play against this guy.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And what about I guess the positions here, it kind of stays the same regardless of the position there, because I guess you have to know, does he call a lot out of position then, and that would affect you if you're going to open in position against him. You have to consider that as well. So that makes sense. Okay, and what about someone who doesn't open enough? I mean, I guess if they open, you're gonna tighten your ranges, right? I mean, that's an obvious. that's an obvious. You're gonna tighten your calling ranges, or in position, are you gonna want to play against them because you can define their hand ranges better? Generally, what do you think there?
That also depends. Let's say if a guy doesn't open enough, and then he's really straightforward post flop. Mm-hmm. You can still see a lot of flops versus them.
Right.
But generally, I guess if a guy doesn't open enough and he's tricky and good post flop, then you're just going to want to fold more, because you're just going to be not have as much equity as you would typically have, and you're not going to be able to call and profit.
Yep, that makes sense.
Right.
It's kind of tricky though. There are situations where a guy's not opening enough, and then maybe he's giving up on the flop a good bit, but you still should fold more pre. It's kind of tricky and hard to figure out.
Right. And I guess that's where your 10,000 hours of practice comes into play, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot in the small details and focusing on the little.
Right.
Yeah.
What tendencies have you found that you yourself had and potentially you worked out of? I guess leaks or whatever that you worked on.
I remember just being ridiculously aggressive. If you watch my videos now, they're more controlled aggression.
Right.
At least from my point of view, but for a long time I was probably one of the most aggressive players, one of the most aggressive regulars, just 3-betting like crazy,
right,
or betting like crazy, and basically just getting owned by other rigs. They would just wait for hands, and I'd give them my money. That was the huge League of Mine.
I guess that's one way to learn about exploiting tendencies is to get your own tendencies exploited.
Yeah.
By good players.
And Daryl, you said you moved to high stakes tournaments pretty early, but have you seen enough low to mid stakes tournament players or hands played out that you could sort of suggest what some things are that those mid stakes players could work on? Like, what are the tendencies that they need to eliminate from their game? Because I certainly have my ideas, but I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that.
I think it's hard to know. I feel like I'm making some generalizations here that could be wrong, but I feel like most of the mid stakes players, the good ones, are really good at the math. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of times they kind of just get caught up in the mathematical side of it, and they don't focus enough on theory and your opponent's tendencies and adjusting your ranges and doing creative shit. I think a lot of the mid-stakes players kind of just fire up 16 tables and push fold all day and don't really get better at poker. So they're kind of just forced sticking in that situation. If you want to make it into the high stakes, it's not going to be from a more enlightened perspective on your push folding range or knowing, learning more about that. There's very little edges to be had, as far as I know. I'm not like one of those super really good push fold guys, so I'm kind of a little bit ignorant there. But I would say just playing less tables, getting reads, learning how to adjust, thinking abstractly rather than in a vacuum, just doing interesting, creative things. Like when you review hands with people, talk to people who play really differently from you, so you get different perspectives, and think of really crazy, ridiculous lines when you're reviewing hands. Like, standard. It's like if a guy, I don't know, just like if a guy bets a river and you're thinking about calling or folding, think about, what about raising? Or, just shit you would never think about, just really crazy shit. Just and think about it. Even if it turns out to nothing, maybe you see something in people's ranges that you wouldn't have normally seen, or you have some kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of times where I'm just thinking of random shit, and that kind of just leads to something else, like a different idea or something.
That's a really good point. I heard an interview with Tom Dwan once that basically said what you just said there. He said when he thinks about his options, he focuses a lot on the one that is the least obvious and the one that is non-standard, and sees if he can make it work, because then it'd be different than what a lot of people would expect, and he might uncover some sort of context which it actually is the best option. So like if it's a clear, why should I fold? If he's facing a situation where it's almost a standard fold, it's like, what if I raise? Like just break your sort of the neural patterns, right, that you have in your head that just force you to follow the same lines over and over again and don't lead to creativity, and you start to explore the opposite or the absurd, and it gives you, a new way to start thinking about certain situations, which, like you said, lead to a new hand. And I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about how to take, specific actions at the table. And that's basically, I think, what you just said. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's really easy to go on autopilot if you're just playing a ton of tables. It's just so easy, and you might be sacrificing some money in the short term by playing less tables, but I think in the long term, you're going to improve your game a ton and have the potential of possibly moving up, or when you do go back to playing a ton of tables, you'll have, an increased ROI from what you've learned.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that you and I have talked about, Diego, is having been forced to play less tables because of the situation in the United States, but it's actually ended up being a little bit of a benefit because we've actually been able to focus. Because towards the end, especially with Full Tilt running, multi-entries and double guarantees and all that stuff, I mean, it was really easy to get 22 tables going.
Yeah, and I'd be traveling for work, and I had my laptop, and I'd open 12 tables on a small laptop, and I really it's not focusing on the actual game. It's just playing robotic, and as Daryl said, where are the edges there? If you're just following standard lines that everyone knows or playing by math, there's no edge there. There's no exploitation of situations. So I agree. I've been forced to cut down my tables. I actually wrote an article on that on the site. Forced to cut down my tables, but I'm enjoying playing a lot more too because it's more of a thinking game now than it was back then. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think most of your creative inspiration should come from when you're not actually playing. I think that's when you should be doing the most thinking about poker.
Yeah.
I think when you're actually playing, it should be more reactionary and more intuitive rather than thinking extremely deeply and trying to be super creative, because I think it will lead to a ton of mistakes and a lot of cost money when you could just do it when you're not playing and be able to think more clearly, more objectively.
Right.
You won't be wasting any money.
How much time do you spend studying as opposed to playing? Like what? I mean, before Black Friday, I guess would be.
I remember in 2011, the start of the year, I would play the 3 weeknights, and then I would play Saturday basically all day, Sunday all day. Then I would do 7 to 14 hours of cash, which is basically just to work on my game and get better at post-flop. I would review every single cash session, which would take between 3 to 6 hours. I would watch 1 or 2 videos a week. I would try to review every single tournament session. I'd probably average 1 or 2 tournaments I would review, a week, which would amount to 3-4 hours. And then I probably read a little bit of forums and talked a little bit of poker with others. Especially when I was reviewing hands, I would always try and talk with others. So I put in probably about 16 hours of practice a week or something.
Wow.
I don't know if I did the math right there. I'm just thinking.
Either way, that's probably a lot. I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel like they're spending a lot of time studying the game and they're putting in 4 to 6 hours a week, or something.
Right, yeah. And they could be like doing other stuff while watching a video, right? They're not focusing on the actual thing they're doing that they're supposed to be doing to learn.
Yeah, there's something to be said though about not burning yourself out and being on a sustainable path. I remember back then I was really just burning myself out. I would put in a ton of hours, and I remember after 1 month of doing it, just being completely burned out and having to take a week off because I was just so, over it. So I think it's probably better for your life, for poker in general, to just have a more balanced approach rather than going really, really hard like I was doing. 2011, I just wanted to start off the year trying to be the absolute best in the world and work my ass off, work harder than anyone.
Right.
And I remember it not working out too well because I burnt myself out completely. And if you read stories, biographies of a lot of really successful people, I think you'll notice same things of how working super hard, being burnt out. I think it's important to just have a sustainable amount of work, amount that you could continue to do and not need breaks from, because I put in all those hours, but at the end of 1 month I needed a week break. So after all those hours I just gave it all back in 1 week.
I am willing to bet that a sustainable amount is still way more than most people do right now. So I think probably there's a lot of room for improvement and seriousness and study in the game than most people do. But
if you really want to get better, you should spend a ton of time working on your game rather than playing, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you made a video on how to get better at poker, and I think that's one of the themes that you had within it. So
yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah,
I know.
It's just really important. I don't know how hard people work, but it's really important to stress not burning yourself out and like killing your like inspiration for the game. I remember just like really hating the game at some point because like how many hours I was putting in.
Right.
But I was also on like a really bad downswing. I'm sure winning helps.
Yeah, winning tends to make everything better.
But I was like working my ass off, and I was like negative 80% ROI for the first 3 months of the year.
God.
So
Actually, we asked you told us about the Sunday Million, but what other scores, major scores, have you had? You had the Sunday Million. I know you had some other big final tables, right?
At one point, I was there was the W Coop main event, and I had like no money online at that point, and me and my friend, I think he plays. Well, his name isn't like too well known online, so I won't even mention it. But we decided to like go partners in like a $300 satellite to the W Coop main.
Mm-hmm.
Played at like 8-9 in the morning or something like that. Got into the main event, and then ended up getting 5th in the main for like $200K.
Wow.
Damn.
Yeah, I remember like we were 5-handed and I was short stack. Everyone was agreeing to the chop, and I would have got like 440 or something like that. And I remember just being like extremely young and not really caring about the money and just like wanting to play to win. And I just turned down the chop, and I like 5 hands later I reshoved 8-3 offsuit versus a button raise. And dude tank calls me with like ace jack off and folds.
Oh.
Wow. And I'm actually wondering if we have a misprint on our website, but have you final tabled 5 Sunday Millions?
Yeah.
That's kind of ridiculous. and won 2 of them, by the way.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously just run pretty good. There's like no secret. I'm just like running really good at that tournament.
Wow. And so, okay, so what's up next for you? Obviously, you're still in the U.S. And are you playing live? What are you doing for the World Series? What's up next for your poker sort of career?
I don't know. Just probably like play cash, play some tourneys. I'm gonna go play the 1200 at Foxwoods tomorrow.
Oh.
You guys are gonna be there. Definitely gonna play some World Series events. I'm really just trying to figure out like what to do with my life after poker.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm spending a lot of time trying to learn how to do that and playing cash and tourneys at the same time.
Right.
I'm not traveling the circuit because I have a wife and kid, and it's super hard on them to do both. And
absolutely,
I'm not rich enough to take them with me, nor would I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Rio is not really where you want your family being raised.
Exactly.
Have your kids playing like next to the slots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so you're going to be in Vegas at all for the World Series?
I'm like 99% sure I'll be there. I'm not sure when, though.
Okay.
Yeah, because you made a nice run. I mean, where a lot of people might know your name from is a pretty deep run in this year's main event, right?
Yeah, I got 89th, which was pretty depressing, but whatever.
Well, I know you were chip leader for a couple of straight days, I think.
Yeah, I was chip leader on like day 3, day 4, and part of day 5, and then it all just kind of went downhill.
It's such a long tournament to sustain that.
Yeah, I tried to like 5-bet bluff some dude like 5 hands into day 6, and I have no reads on him, and he 6-bet shoved on me, and I lost like 1 million chips doing that.
Whoa.
Then I just lost like 4 all-ins, couple of coin flips. I was ahead by a lot on one of them. And then, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like Diego said, it's such a long tournament to try to not have anything go bad over that long of a period is tough to do.
Yeah.
Well, you got a lot of airtime too. I think a lot of people know you from that tournament. So
for sure. Well, we'll make sure we do another podcast called TPE Live, which we do from Vegas and other live events, and we just kind of recap how tournaments went that day and any interesting hands and stuff like that. So if you do make it out, we'll make sure to get together and maybe get you on one of those to just check in with you and see how things are going out there over the summer.
Yeah, come by the TPE house during the World Series. We have a house there.
Oh, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Come visit.
Yep. Absolutely.
Cool.
Cool. Well, thanks, Daryl. We appreciate you taking some time out to do the podcast, and hopefully we'll be able to get you on again in the future soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Daryl.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks, Daryl. All right, we'll take a quick break, and then we will return to wrap up on this episode of the Tournament Poker Edge podcast.
You're part of it. Yeah! You're part of it. Hey! You're part of it. Yeah! You're part of it. I walk the streets of a Carolina, watching people pushing shopping carts. And there's a guy above me, and he's washing windows, making $10 a pop. And he says to me, hey, you're part of it. Yeah, you're part of it. Hey, you're part of it. Yeah, you're part of it.
Welcome back to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. Special thanks to Daryl Jace for stopping by today, imparting some wisdom on us there. I like it.
Yeah, that was awesome. I like those theoretical conversations. I have to admit, I like talking about abstract, not abstract, but sort of conceptual poker theory, and how to think about the game more than just at the table. And he's the perfect pro to have that conversation with. I thought he was awesome. I thought he was really helpful. He really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff there. It was really cool.
Yeah, I think I remember when he did his video on how to get better at poker, study, basically how to study and what to do to get better. I found that so fascinating because you spend so much time just watching how to play hands.
Yeah.
But you don't get a lot of time. You don't really get a pro to tell you how to get better at playing.
It really opened my eyes. Yeah, and I'll tell you that his 6-part series that just wrapped up is what I'm going to watch before I go play the main event.
Yeah.
So that's how much I like his stuff. That's going to be the one I review again, because I found it's kind of the most transferable to live poker too. I felt, because he focuses so much on everything that's going on at the table, and you have that opportunity with live games that you're only playing one table.
Right.
Yeah. So this was pretty cool. So yeah, I thought the topic on exploiting and where to start with what to look for to exploit, and God, amazing how much time he spent playing poker, huh? Yeah,
not only playing, but how much time he spent studying.
Yeah.
Jeez. I mean, what do you say? Like, he estimated 16 hours a week. I mean,
yeah.
I run a poker training site. I don't know if I study 16 hours a week. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And I also thought it was interesting to hear him talk about how, for mid-stakes players to transition to the high stakes. I thought it was really solid advice when he talked about cutting down the number of tables and, maybe even giving up some money, and some EV in return for getting better at the game, because that's what you're going to need at the high stakes. Because he makes a really good point. I mean, I don't play a ton of high stakes, but I assume he's right when he says that most of those guys have mastered bet sizing and push fold game and all that stuff. So the thing that's going to set you apart is all those little intricacies that he talked about and exploiting them.
Yep.
So I thought that was really solid advice. So for those of you out there who are looking to transition from the mid stakes to the high stakes, there you go.
Yep. That's a set of videos to watch for sure. And he's going to be writing some more articles for us coming up. So look for those.
Yeah, he's a great addition. Pretty stoked to have him on the team. So
absolutely.
Cool. So speaking of additions and stuff going on the site, what is going on the site these days?
So first off, membership is surging. I don't know, peek behind the scene. I don't. It's just great. Like TPE, there's more people coming every day, and the quality of members is still high, I think. Like you said earlier, the chat room is booming. So it's a good time at TPE. Everyone is really contributing, and the forum's hopping. From a content perspective, I will say I think one of the most interesting series that we've ever done is about to come up. It just so happened that Big Dog was going to do a live sweat one night, and he made it. He was playing a bunch of tournaments, and he started to get deep in the 109 rebuy. And on his break, he IMs me. He says, "Hey, I'm recording, and I'm here at a table with Ben Warrington, Kid Cardiff, one of our new pros, and he's recording too." I was like, "Oh no fucking way!"
That's great.
I was so happy. And so they both recorded the same tournament, and they've spent basically 4 videos together. So the series itself, I'm combining them. I'm making them one series because it's one tournament, right? I mean, so I think it's like sort of an epic series of 10 parts of Ben starts his session a little earlier, starts recording a little earlier. So the first 2 parts are Ben, and then Casey comes in, and then we have 4 parts of them together. And then I'm not going to spoil who makes it further. So, then one of the pros is further along. So I'm not going to spoil that. But we get basically a dual live sweat. And what I did was I spliced them together. So we watch, the hand from Ben's perspective. Then they get into a lot of pots together. That's the thing, right?
Wow.
So
that'll be cool.
We watch the hand from Ben's perspective, and then we watch the hand from Casey's perspective.
Huh.
It's really, I think it's going to be one of the best videos on the site. I really enjoyed watching it. So that is going to be the primary driver of what's going to be on the site for the next couple of weeks. And then we have a guest pro returning, and we won't say who yet.
It's a big secret. You got to hang around to find out.
The return of one of our guest pros, someone who was very well reviewed as well. So we got that going on. That's the primary thing going on. And then I'm sure we're going to get another podcast in beforehand, but TPE is going to the WSOPC in Atlantic City. So we'll preview that next time. But we're a lot of planning around that going on the site right now. Oh, and another cool thread that I want to talk about is there's a thread on what's your must-watch videos, which is cool because there's a lot of great advice there on what videos people really like and want to watch. So that's a thread worth checking out.
Yeah, especially if you're a newer member. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I guess we're actually coming up on our 2-year anniversary now that I think about it. But that aside, we have a shit ton of videos.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you joined the site yesterday, it's got to be overwhelming to go, wow, 450 or almost 500 videos. Like, where do I even start? And there has been an increase in number of posts of people going, where do I start?
And we're writing, we're actually creating member guides for that. So that'll be out in just a bit. To address that, but in the meantime, there's what must-watch videos, and we have a weekly column that we just started called "What's New at TPE," where Benny Maka, one of our mods in our forum, one of our best, absolute most active members, writes a weekly article on what videos were released and some of the interesting forum posts and articles, as well as reviews, the podcast. So that's a great source of information on, what to watch and what, give you a summary of what you may be interested in.
Yeah, people have been loving that.
Yep.
And Benny does a great job on it, so we're really happy to have him doing that.
Yep. So that's what's going on the site.
Cool. Well, another great podcast in the books.
Absolutely.
So thanks again to Daryl for stopping in. Much appreciated. We'll be sure to get him on again as soon as we can.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, we'll see you back here in a couple of weeks on the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. See you, everybody.
Yep.
Texas, please. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart,
with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it isn't fun. Oh, whoa.